Hello everybody. If you want to read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you. Short story 479, Bitof Kerfuffle down the allotment. Slang. Upper beginner. Right then, gather round you lot. Let me spin you a yarn about a bit of a kerfuffle that went down our way in Taunton. Just the other week. It all started down the allotment, you see. Now, an allotment is like a little patch of garden where folks grow their own veg. You know, carrots, potatoes, the whole shebang. There's this bloke, Arthur, a proper old-timer, been tending to his plot since donkey's years. He's a good egg. Arthur, a bit daft as a brush, sometimes, but his heart's in the right place. He grows cracking tomatoes, mind you, juicy and red as a pillar box. Anyway, next to Arthur's plot is young Dave's. Dave's a newbie to the allotment game, keen as mustard, but a bit of a clot sometimes, if you catch my drift. He means well, but he's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. Bless him. So the other Tuesday, Arthur went down to his plot, bright and early, ready for a bit of pottering about. He had his wellies on, his trusty trowel in hand, and a flask of builder's tea tucked in his bag. He was looking forward to checking on his prize-winning marrows. But when he got there, crikey! What a sight! Dave was standing in the middle of Arthur's plot, looking as guilty as sin, surrounded by uprooted tomato plants. "Oi!" Arthur bellowed, his chops going a bit white. "What in blazes do you think you're doing?" Dave jumped a mile, looking like a rabbit caught in the headlights. Morning, Arthur," he mumbled, kicking a bit of soil with his boot. "Didn't see you there." "Didn't see me? I'm stood here like a lemon. What's happened to my tomatoes, you nutter?" Arthur was getting proper riled up now. Dave shuffled his feet. "Well, you see, Arthur," he began, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I thought they were weeds." Arthur stared at him, his mouth agape. "Weeds? These are my prize-winning big boys. I've been nursing them since God was a lad." "Sorry," Dave mumbled again, looking proper gutted. "They just looked a bit leafy." Arthur let out a long tut. "Leafy? They're tomato plants, you muppet. Don't you know your tomatoes from your nettles?" Just then Mrs. Higgins, a right busybody from the next plot, popped her head over the fence. "What's all the commotion then?" she chirped, her eyes gleaming with interest. Arthur explained the cock-up, his voice still a bit shaky. Mrs. Higgins clucked like an old hen. "Honestly, some people doesn't know his elbow from his backside," she muttered, loud enough for Dave to hear. Dave's face went as red as one of Arthur's now uprooted tomatoes. "Look, Arthur, I'm really sorry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll sort it out. I'll buy you some new plants." Arthur sighed. He could see the lad was genuinely chuffed with himself. "All right, Dave," he said, his voice softening a bit. "No harm done, I suppose. Just try and bit more clued up next time." "Definitely," Dave said eagerly. "I'll even help you plant the new ones." And that's what they did. Dave looked properly hangdog at first, actually turned out to be quite helpful. They went down the garden centre, picked out some lovely new tomato plants, and spent the afternoon grafting away, getting them planted. Mrs. Higgins kept popping her head over the fence, offering her 2 penn'orth, and tutting under her breath, but Arthur just gave her a wink. By the end of the day, Arthur's plot was looking a bit less bare, and Dave had learned a valuable lesson about the difference between tomatoes and weeds. They even shared a cuppa and a biscuit afterwards, and Arthur admitted that Dave wasn't such a bad bloke after all, just a bit of a numpty sometimes. So there you have it, a bit of a flap down the allotment. All's well that ends well, and young Dave learned that when it comes to gardening, it pays to be on the ball. Vocabulary notes. 1. Kerfuffle, meaning a disturbance, commotion or fuss, often minor or silly. Example, let me spin you a yarn about a bit of a kerfuffle that went down our way. Similar words, commotion, fuss, bother, to-do, rumpus, agitation, palaver. Example using a similar word. There was quite a fuss when a delivery driver arrived late. 2. Allotment, meaning a small piece of land rented from a local council or organisation for growing vegetables, fruit or flowers. Example, it all started down the allotment, you see. Similar words, vegetable patch, garden plot, community garden, though this can be larger and more organised. Example using a similar word. He spends most of his weekends working in his vegetable patch. 3. Veg, meaning short for vegetables. Example, where folks grow their own veg. You know, carrots, potatoes, the whole shebang. Similar words, vegetables, greens. Example using a similar word. Make sure you eat plenty of vegetables to stay healthy. 4. Shebang, meaning everything, the whole lot, often used informally to refer to a complete set of things. Example, carrots, potatoes, the whole shebang. Similar words, the whole lot, the works, the whole caboodle, everything. Example using a similar word. We ordered the pizza with the works. 5. Old-timer, meaning an elderly person, especially one with a lot of experience in a particular field. Example, there's this bloke, Arthur, a proper old-timer, been tending his plot since donkey's years. Similar words, veteran, senior, elder, someone who's been around for a long time. Example using a similar word. My granddad is a real veteran of the Second World War. 6. Good egg, meaning a good-natured, kind and reliable person. Example, he's a good egg. Arthur, a bit daft as a brush sometimes, but his heart's in the right place. Similar words, good sort, decent person, kind soul, someone with a good heart. Example using a similar word. She's a decent person, always willing to help others. 7. Daft as a brush, meaning very silly or foolish. Example, he's a good egg, Arthur, a bit daft as a brush sometimes. Similar words, silly, foolish, a bit stupid, not very bright, a bit dippy. Example using a similar word. He asked a really silly question. 8. Pillar box, meaning a red cylindrical post box used in the UK for mailing letters. Example, juicy and red as a pillar box. Similar words, post box, mailbox, more common in the US. Example using a similar word. I need to post this letter in the post box. 9. Newbie, meaning a person who is new to a particular activity or situation. Example, Dave's a newbie to the allotment game. Similar words, beginner, novice, learner, rookie. Example using a similar word. He's a beginner at playing the guitar. 10. Keen as mustard, meaning very enthusiastic or eager. Example, Dave's a newbie to the allotment game, keen as mustard. Similar words, very eager, enthusiastic, keen, excited. Example using a similar word. She's very eager to start her new job. 11. Clot, meaning a clumsy, foolish or annoying person, often used in a mild and slightly affectionate way. Example, keen as mustard but a bit of a clot sometimes, if you catch my drift. Similar words, clumsy person, fool, idiot, used with caution as it can be offensive, numpty, see later. Example using a similar word. Oh, don't be such a fool. 12. Sharpest tool in the shed, meaning intelligent or clever, often used in the negative to mean someone is not very intelligent. Example, he's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, bless him. Similar words, negative, not very bright, a bit slow, not the cleverest, not the smartest. Example using a similar word. He's a nice guy, but not the cleverest. 13. Pottering about, meaning doing small leisurely tasks, often in the garden or around the house. Example, he had his wellies on, his trusty trowel in hand, and a flask of builder's tea tucked in his bag. He was looking forward to checking on his prize-winning marrows. Context implies he was going to do this. Similar words, tinkering, fiddling, doing odd jobs, taking one's time doing small tasks. Example using a similar word. She enjoys tinkering in the garden on a Sunday morning. 14. Wellies, meaning Wellington boots, waterproof rubber boots, often worn in wet or muddy conditions. Example, he had his wellies on. Similar words, rubber boots, gum boots. Example using a similar sentence. Don't forget your rubber boots if you're going for a walk in the countryside. 15. Trowel, meaning a small hand tool with a flat pointed blade used for digging and moving soil in gardening. Example, his trusty trowel in hand. Similar words, hand shovel, spade, though a spade is usually larger. Example using a similar word. I need a hand shovel to plant these flowers. 16. Builder's tea, meaning a strong cup of tea typically made with milk and sugar, often associated with construction workers. Example, and a flask of builder's tea tucked in his bag. Similar words, strong tea, milky tea, though this doesn't necessarily imply it's strong. Example using a similar word. He likes his tea strong and sweet, a proper milky tea. 17. Crikey, meaning an exclamation of surprise or shock, mildly informal. Example, but when he got there, crikey, what a sight. Similar words, wow, blimey, good heavens, caw, oh my goodness. Example using a similar word. Wow, look at that amazing sunset. 18. Chops, meaning the mouth and surrounding cheeks. Example, Arthur bellowed, his chops going a bit white. Similar words, mouth, face in this context. Example using a similar word. He wiped his mouth with a napkin. 19. Blazes, meaning an exclamation of anger or surprise, often used in phrases like, what's in blazes? Example, what in blazes do you think you're doing? Similar words, hell, the devil, stronger and potentially offensive. Example using a similar word, what the hell are you doing? 20. Rabbit caught in the headlights, meaning looking startled, frightened, and unable to move or think clearly. Example, Dave jumped a mile looking like a rabbit caught in headlights. Similar words, startled, frozen with fear, dumbfounded. Example using a similar word. She looked completely startled when I shouted her name. 21. Nutter, meaning a crazy or foolish person, can be used playfully or offensively depending on tone and context. Example, what's happened to my tomatoes, you nutter? Here it's used in anger but perhaps not with extreme malice. Similar words, madman, lunatic, idiot, fool, more playfully, silly person. Example using a similar word, he's a bit of an idiot sometimes. 22. Nursing them, meaning taking great care of something, helping it to grow or recover. Example, these are my prize-winning big boys. I've been nursing them since God was a lad. Similar words, tending, looking after, caring for, cultivating. Example using a similar word, she spent weeks caring for the injured bird. 23. God was a lad, meaning a very long time ago. Example, I've been nursing them since God was a lad. Similar words, ages ago, a very long time ago, for years and years. Example using a similar word, I haven't seen him for ages. 24. Gutted, meaning very disappointed or upset. Example, sorry, Dave mumbled again, looking proper gutted. Similar words, very disappointed, heartbroken, devastated, crushed. Example using a similar word, she was heartbroken when her team lost. 25. Tut, meaning a clicking sound made with the tongue to express disapproval, annoyance or mild criticism. Example, Arthur let out a long tut. Similar sounds, expression, tsk, tsk, though this can also be written. Example using a similar sound. He made a tsk, tsk sound when he saw the mess. 26. Muppet, meaning a foolish or incompetent person, often used in a light-hearted or affectionate way. Example, they're tomato plants, you muppet. Don't you know your tomatoes from your nettles? Similar words, idiot, fool, silly person, more affectionately, daft person. Example using a similar word, don't be such an idiot, you'll fall over. 27. Nettles, meaning plants with leaves covered in stinging hairs. Example, don't you know your tomatoes from your nettles? Similar words, stinging nettles. Example using a similar word, be careful not to touch the stinging nettles. 28. Busybody, meaning a person who interferes in other people's affairs. Example, just then Mrs. Higgins, a right busybody from the next plot, popped her head over the fence. Similar words, nosy Parker, meddler, interferer. Example using a similar word, my neighbour is such a nosy Parker. 29. Commotion, meaning a noisy disturbance. Example, what's all the commotion then? Similar words, disturbance, uproar, fuss, kerfuffle, as seen earlier. Example using a similar word, the loud music caused a disturbance. 30. Cock up, meaning a mistake or blunder, often a serious one, quite informal. Example, Arthur explained the cock up, his voice still a bit shaky. Similar words, mistake, blunder, mess up, foul up. Example using a similar word, there was a major mistake in the report. 31. Doesn't know his elbow from his backside, meaning very stupid or ignorant. Example, honestly, some people doesn't know his elbow from his backside. Similar words, very stupid, clueless, not very intelligent. Example using a similar word, he's completely clueless about computers. 32. Chuffed with himself, meaning pleased or satisfied. Example, he could see the lad was genuinely chuffed with himself. Similar words: pleased, delighted, satisfied, happy. Example using a similar word: she was delighted with her exam results. 33. Hangdog, meaning having a dejected or guilty appearance. Example, Dave looking probably hangdog at first. Similar words: ashamed, guilty looking, dejected, downcast. Example using a similar word: he looked ashamed after breaking the vase. 34. Grafting away, meaning working hard. Example, and spent the afternoon grafting away getting them planted. Similar words: working hard, toiling, labouring, slogging. Example using a similar word: they were labouring in the hot sun all day. 35. Two penn'orth, meaning one's opinion often offered even when not wanted, based on the idea of something cheap and therefore not very valuable. Example, Mrs. Higgins kept popping her head over the fence, offering her 2 penn'orth. Similar words: opinion, often unwanted, 2 cents worth, US English. Example using a similar word: he always gives his opinion even when nobody asks for it. 36. Wink, meaning to close one eye briefly as a signal, often of amusement, agreement, or understanding. Example, but Arthur just gave her a wink. Similar words: nod can sometimes convey similar meaning, but is a different action. Example using a similar word: he gave her a nod to show he understood. 37. Bare, meaning empty without covering. Example, by the end of the day Arthur's plot was looking a bit less bare. Similar words: empty, exposed, uncovered. Example using a similar word: the shelves were empty. 38. Cuppa, meaning a cup of tea. Example, they even shared a cuppa and a biscuit afterwards. Similar words: cup of tea. Example using a similar word: would you like a cup of tea? 39. Biscuit, meaning in British English a small, usually sweet baked item, what Americans would often call a cookie. Example, shared a cuppa and a biscuit afterwards. Similar words: cookie, US English. Example using a similar word: she ate a chocolate chip cookie. 40. Bloke, meaning a man, informal. Example, Arthur admitted that Dave wasn't such a bad bloke after all. Similar words: man, guy, fellow. Example using a similar word: he's a nice guy. 41. Numpty, meaning a foolish or stupid person, similar to Muppet but perhaps slightly stronger. Example, just a bit of a numpty sometimes. Similar words: idiot, fool, twit, nitwit. Example using a similar word: don't be such a twit. 42. Flap, meaning a state of agitation or excitement, a fuss. Example, so there you have it, a bit of a flap down the allotment. Similar words: fuss, panic, bother, commotion, as seen earlier. Example using a similar word: there was a bit of a panic when the fire alarm went off. 43. All's well that ends well, meaning a proverb meaning that a happy conclusion makes up for any difficulties along the way. Example, a bit of a flap down the allotment, all's well that ends well. Similar proverbs: no harm done in the end. 44. On the ball, meaning alert, competent and efficient. Example, and young Dave learned that when it comes to gardening, it pays to be on the ball. Similar words: efficient, competent, alert, quick-witted, sharp. Example using a similar word: she's really efficient at her job. Story written by Gemini AI. Image created by Designer AI. To read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you.